The radio crackled with desperation at 3:47 hours, piercing through the pre-dawn darkness over the Hindu Kush Mountains. Overwatch, Overwatch, this is Blackbird 7. We have multiple KIA, I repeat, multiple KIA. SEAL team is pinned down in the valley. Request immediate close air support. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reaper Hendricks, a man who'd never requested backup in his 15-year career. But today, something had gone catastrophically wrong. High above at 28,000 feet, Captain Valentina, Viper, Kozlov adjusted her helmet's night vision display and peered down at the maze of rocky outcroppings below. The A-10 Thunderbolt II hummed beneath her, its twin turbofan engines creating a steady vibration through the titanium bathtub that surrounded her cockpit. She'd been orbiting this godforsaken piece of Afghanistan for 3 hours, watching infrared signatures move like deadly chess pieces across her targeting pod display. Copy, Blackbird 7. This is Viper 1-1. I have eyes on your position. Her voice carried the measured calm that came from 4 combat deployments and 847 logged combat hours, but something in the pattern below made her skin crawl. The enemy positions formed a perfect killbox, too perfect. This wasn't random insurgent activity. Someone with serious tactical training had orchestrated this ambush. Through her earpiece, she could hear the staccato of automatic weapons fire, punctuated by the deeper boom of RPG rounds. The SEALs were trapped in a dried riverbed, surrounded on 3 sides by elevated positions that provided devastating fields of fire. Her targeting computer identified 17 separate muzzle flashes, each one representing a fighter who knew exactly what they were doing. Viper 1-1, be advised we have attempted multiple extraction attempts, lost 2 birds already. The LZ is too hot, and these aren't your typical Taliban fighters. They're using military-grade equipment and coordinated fire discipline. Reaper's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. My snipers can't get clean shots. They're moving too fast, using terrain like they trained at Benying. Valentina banked the A-10 in a wide circle, studying the tactical situation. In the growing light of dawn, she could see the precision of the enemy's positioning. Each fighting position provided overlapping fields of fire while remaining protected from aerial attack by natural rock formations. Whoever planned this new American close air support doctrine inside and out. The radio burst with another voice, younger, more desperate. This is Sergeant Kim. We've got wounded down here and we're running low on ammo. If somebody doesn't do something soon, we're not making it home. Valentina's jaw tightened. Below her, 17 Americans were about to die, and everyone was looking to the sky for salvation. The morning sun caught her aircraft's distinctive shark-tooth nose art as she began her descent toward hell. What happened next would either save those men or add her name to the casualty list. The enemy had planned for everything, except for a pilot who didn't play by the rules they expected. Valentina, Viper, Kozlov had learned to fight dirty in places where clean tactics got you killed. And today, she was about to remind everyone why her call sign struck fear into enemy combatants across 3 continents. The war was about to meet a woman who made her own rules. Valentina pushed the A-10 into a steep dive, feeling the familiar rush of G-forces pressing her into her ejection seat. The Thunderbolt II wasn't built for finesse. It was an airborne tank designed to deliver devastating firepower and absorb punishment that would destroy lesser aircraft. As she descended through 15,000 feet, the enemy positions became clearer through her targeting pod. Each fighter wore matching tactical gear and moved with the disciplined precision of Special Operations Forces. Blackbird 7, this is Viper 1-1. I need you to mark the closest enemy position with infrared strobes. I'm coming in hot. Her hands moved across the weapons panel with practiced efficiency, selecting her GAU-8 Avenger 30 cannon. The 7-barrel rotary cannon could fire depleted uranium rounds at 3,900 rounds per minute, enough firepower to turn an armored vehicle into scrap metal. Viper, negative on the gun runs. The enemy positions are too close to our guys. Danger close is 5 meters. You'd be shooting right over our heads." Reaper's voice carried the weight of command responsibility. "We need precision strikes, not area effects." Through her heads-up display, Valentina could see the infrared signatures of the pinned SEALs huddled behind a fallen boulder. The nearest enemy position was barely 30 meters away, close enough that she could see individual muzzle flashes through her magnified optics. Standard doctrine called for a minimum separation of 200 meters for gun runs. Going in this close violated every safety protocol in the book. "Understood, Blackbird 7. Switching to Mavericks." She cycled through her weapons systems to the AGM-65 air-to-surface missiles mounted beneath her wings. Each Maverick carried a 300-pound warhead with pinpoint accuracy, but in this terrain, even precision weapons could create deadly ricochets and rock slides. The first missile streaked away from her aircraft with a trail of white smoke, guided by her targeting laser toward a machine gun nest carved into the mountainside. The explosion sent a pillar of orange flame climbing toward the sky, followed by a secondary blast that suggested they'd hit an ammunition cache. But instead of reducing enemy fire, the remaining positions seemed to intensify their assault. "Good hit, Viper. That's one down, but we've still got 16 active positions, and they're moving again. Looks like they're trying to flank us from the North Ridge." The voice belonged to a different SEAL call sign, Nomad, whose radio discipline remained crisp despite the chaos below. Valentina circled for another attack run, studying the enemy's movement patterns. They weren't retreating or seeking better cover. Instead, they were executing a complex maneuver designed to eliminate the trapped Americans while maintaining protection from air attack. Each team moved in coordinated bounds, providing covering fire for advancing elements while staying within the shadow of rock overhangs that limited her targeting angles. "Blackbird 7, I'm reading multiple heat signatures moving up the north face. It looks like they're carrying heavy weapons, possibly mortars or recoilless rifles." Her targeting pod tracked a group of 8 fighters climbing a steep path that would give them a commanding view of the SEAL's position. "Roger, Viper, we see them too. If they reach that ridge, we're done. Can you interdict?" Reaper's question carried an undertone of desperation that no amount of training could completely mask. Valentina banked hard left, lining up for another missile shot. But as she acquired the climbing fighters in her crosshairs, she realized the horrible truth about their tactical situation. The enemy had studied American air support procedures and positioned themselves to exploit every limitation of precision weapons in mountainous terrain. They were fighting a chess match where they knew all of her possible moves. The radio crackled with a new voice, higher-pitched, younger, carrying the distinctive accent of the American South. "Viper, this is Corpsman Bradley. I've got 3 urgent surgical and 2 priority wounds down here. We need immediate case-vac or these boys aren't gonna make it to lunch." The clinical detachment in his voice spoke of a medic working beyond the limits of his supplies and training. High above the valley, Valentina felt the weight of 17 lives pressing down on her shoulders. The enemy had planned this perfectly, almost too perfectly, which made her wonder who they were really fighting and why they wanted these particular SEALs dead. The sun climbed higher, and with each passing minute, the trapped Americans grew weaker while their enemies grew bolder. Valentina had 12 Maverick missiles remaining, but she was beginning to understand that conventional weapons wouldn't be enough. This enemy had prepared for a conventional response. They hadn't prepared for what she was about to do. Down in the valley, Reaper's voice cut through the tactical chatter with the kind of calm that comes from accepting the inevitable. "All stations, this is Blackbird 7. We're going to make our stand here. If anyone's got any miracles left in their back pocket, now would be a good time to break them out." His transmission clicked off, leaving only the sound of distant gunfire bleeding through the radio channels. Valentina stared at the tactical display, showing enemy positions scattered across the mountainside like a constellation of death. Standard doctrine had failed. Conventional weapons had failed. The enemy's discipline and preparation had neutralized every advantage American forces typically enjoyed in mountain warfare. But there was one advantage: they hadn't accounted for a pilot who'd learned to fight in places where the rules were written in blood rather than field manuals. She keyed her radio with a transmission that would either save 17 lives or end her career. "Blackbird 7, this is Viper 11. I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. We're going to try something that isn't in the book." Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd already decided to cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "Copy, Viper. At this point, we're willing to try anything. What do you need?" Reaper's response came immediately, carrying the desperate hope of men who'd run out of options. "I need you to pop smoke and mark your exact position. Then I need every man to get as low as possible and stay there no matter what happens. I'm coming in danger close, and I mean danger close." She began configuring her weapons systems for an attack profile that violated every safety regulation she'd ever been taught. Through her helmet-mounted display, she could see the enemy fighters moving with renewed confidence. They believed they'd neutralized the air threat through superior positioning and tactical discipline. They were about to learn why Valentina Kozlov had earned her call sign in the crucible of urban combat operations, where precision and aggression were the only things that kept pilots alive. The A-10 responded to her control inputs with the heavy responsiveness of a flying tank. As she rolled into a steep dive toward the valley floor, she could feel the aircraft systems compensating for the extreme angle of attack. Her heads-up display painted targeting solutions across the rocky landscape below, each one representing another chance to save American lives or add her own name to the memorial wall. What separated elite pilots from competent ones wasn't superior equipment or advanced training. It was the willingness to push beyond the boundaries of doctrine when lives hung in the balance. Today, those boundaries were about to be shattered by a woman who'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to fight like the enemy never expected. The morning sun reflected off her canopy as she dove toward the valley, carrying death on her wings and salvation in her heart. The A-10 Thunderbolt II screamed toward the valley floor at a 45-degree angle, its twin engines howling as Valentina pushed the aircraft beyond its recommended dive parameters. Through her targeting pod, she could see individual enemy fighters scrambling for better positions, their disciplined formations beginning to show cracks as they realized the American pilot was attempting something suicidal. "Viper 11, pull up. You're coming in too steep." The voice belonged to an Air Force controller orbiting somewhere high above in an AWACS aircraft, his radar scope showing Valentina's aircraft diving toward terrain that would normally trigger every warning system in existence. She ignored the transmission and focused on the task at hand. At 2,000 feet above ground level, she began her gun run not at the standard safe distance of 200 meters from friendly forces, but directly over the heads of the pinned SEALs. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon's distinctive buzzsaw roar echoed off the valley walls as 30mm depleted uranium rounds chewed through rock and flesh with equal efficiency. The first burst caught an enemy machine gun team that had been providing covering fire from a position carved into the cliff face. The 30 rounds didn't just silence the weapon. They vaporized the fighting position in a shower of pulverized stone and superheated metal. But Valentina's real target was the psychological effect on the remaining fighters who suddenly realized they were facing a pilot willing to die to complete her mission. "Jesus Christ, Viper, you just flew through your own debris cloud." Reaper's voice carried a mixture of awe and terror. "That was a 20-foot separation." Valentina pulled hard on the stick, feeling the G-forces compress her spine as she climbed back to altitude for another pass. Through her rear-facing mirror, she could see chunks of rock still falling from her first gun run. The enemy positions that had seemed so impregnable moments before were now exposed and vulnerable, their carefully planned fields of fire disrupted by an attack angle no reasonable pilot would attempt. "Blackbird 7, I count 14 active positions remaining, marking targets for sequential engagement. Her voice remained steady despite the fact that she just performed a maneuver that should have resulted in her aircraft becoming a crater on the valley floor. Keep your heads down. I'm coming around for another pass. But as she banked for her second attack run, something changed in the enemy's behavior. Instead of seeking better cover or attempting to disengage, they began moving toward the trapped SEALs with the desperate aggression of fighters who knew their mission had been compromised. Through her thermal imaging, she could see them abandoning their protected positions to advance across open ground. Viper, they're coming at us. Multiple squads advancing from the east and north ridges. They're moving like they don't care about casualties. Nomad's transmission crackled with automatic weapons fire in the background. The tactical situation had shifted from a siege to a direct assault. Valentina realized with cold clarity that her unconventional gun run had done more than eliminate enemy positions. It had forced them to abandon their carefully planned ambush and fight on terms that favored neither side. The enemy fighters were now exposed on open ground, but they were also closing distance with wounded Americans who had limited ammunition and no room to maneuver. She rolled into another diving attack, this time targeting the advancing enemy squads with precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each burst from her cannon was calibrated to the millisecond, walking destructive fire across the rocky terrain just meters ahead of the advancing fighters. The psychological effect was immediate trained soldiers diving for cover that didn't exist, their disciplined advance dissolving into chaos. Outstanding, Viper. You've got them running, but we've got a problem. I'm counting more heat signatures on the south ridge. Looks like reinforcements moving up from the valley floor. The voice belonged to the SEAL team's forward observer, call sign Prophet, whose job was to coordinate fire support and track enemy movement. Through her targeting pod, Valentina could see what Prophet had spotted: another 12 fighters climbing a switchback trail that would bring them into position to flank the Americans. But these new arrivals moved differently than the others. They carried heavier weapons and advanced with the confident precision of an elite unit that had never tasted defeat. The radio burst with a transmission that made her blood run cold. All stations, this is Overwatch. Be advised, we have intercepted enemy communications indicating this is a high-value target elimination mission. They're not here for the SEALs, they're here for someone specific. The AWACS controller's voice carried the clinical detachment of intelligence analysis, but his words hit like a physical blow. Valentina's mind raced through the tactical implications. This wasn't a random ambush or a target of opportunity. Someone had leaked operational details and set up the SEALs to be eliminated by a professional killing team. The precision of the enemy's positioning, their advanced equipment, and their willingness to take casualties all pointed to a contract operation with specific objectives. Blackbird 7, this is Viper 1-1. I need to know who's your highest value asset down there. Her question carried the weight of someone who'd just realized they were fighting a war within a war. The radio remained silent for several seconds before Reaper's voice returned, heavy with implications. Viper, we've got a CIA asset with us. High-level intelligence courier carrying data from a blown operation in Pakistan. If that intel falls into the wrong hands. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Valentina understood that 17 American lives were just collateral damage in a larger game, where the real prize was information that could compromise ongoing operations across the region. The enemy wasn't trying to win a tactical engagement. They were executing a strategic operation to capture or kill an intelligence asset whose knowledge could shift the balance of power in the shadow war being fought across Central Asia. She banked hard right, studying the advancing reinforcements through her targeting system. These fighters carried equipment she'd never seen before: advanced communications gear, precision rifles, and movement patterns that suggested training far beyond anything the Taliban or Al-Qaeda could provide. They were hunting specific prey, and they had the resources to see the mission through regardless of cost. The morning sun climbed higher, and with each passing minute, Valentina realized that conventional air support wouldn't be enough to save the men below. The enemy had prepared for American air power, American tactics, and American doctrine. But they hadn't prepared for a pilot who'd learned that sometimes survival required abandoning everything you'd been taught and fighting with the desperate creativity of someone who refused to lose. As she rolled into her third gun run, Valentina Kozlov made a decision that would either save 17 lives or end her military career. The rules of engagement were about to meet a woman who made her own rules. And today, those rules were written in 30mm cannon fire and the unbreakable will of a pilot who'd never left anyone behind. The reinforcements advancing up the South Ridge moved with the coordinated precision of Special Operations Forces, each fighter maintaining proper intervals and fields of fire as they climbed toward positions that would give them commanding views of the trapped Americans. Through her targeting pod, Valentina could see they carried sophisticated equipment, thermal imaging scopes, encrypted communications gear, and weapons that definitely didn't come from Taliban supply caches. Viper 1-1, this is Prophet. I'm getting electronic warfare signatures from the new contacts. They're jamming our satellite communications and running active countermeasures against your targeting pod. The forward observer's voice carried the professional concern of someone who understood that their technological advantages were being systematically eliminated. Valentina felt her targeting display flicker and blur as enemy electronic warfare systems attempted to disrupt her sensors. But the A-10 had been designed to fight in contested electromagnetic environments, and her backup systems automatically compensated for the interference. What worried her more was the tactical sophistication this demonstrated. These weren't insurgent fighters with captured weapons. They were professionals conducting a precise military operation. She rolled into another attack run, this time targeting the electronic warfare equipment with a precision strike from her remaining Maverick missiles. The AGM-65 streaked down from altitude and detonated in a brilliant flash that temporarily overwhelmed her night vision display. When her sensors cleared, she could see secondary explosions rippling across the South Ridge as sophisticated equipment was reduced to burning debris. Good effect on target, Viper. Their jamming just went offline. Reaper's voice carried renewed hope. But we've got movement all around us now. It looks like they're setting up for a final assault. Through her thermal imaging, Valentina could see the tactical picture developing with crystal clarity. The enemy had abandoned their siege tactics in favor of a direct assault, designed to overwhelm the Americans through superior numbers and coordinated fire. They were willing to accept heavy casualties to complete their mission, which meant either the intelligence asset was incredibly valuable, or they were being paid enough to make suicide acceptable. Blackbird 7, I need you to identify your CIA asset. If they're the primary target, we need to extract them immediately. Her transmission cut through the tactical chatter with command authority that brooked no argument. Negative, Viper. Asset security is classified above your clearance level. Reaper's response carried the rigid adherence to protocol that could get everyone killed in situations where protocol hadn't anticipated the tactical reality. Copy that, Blackbird 7, but understand that those fighters down there aren't following protocol either. They're willing to die to complete their mission, which means your asset has information worth more than all of our lives combined. She banked into another gun run, her cannon rounds stitching across enemy positions with surgical precision. As her 30 depleted uranium rounds chewed through rock and equipment, Valentina realized that conventional tactics weren't going to be sufficient. The enemy had too many advantages, numerical superiority, prepared positions, and most importantly, they were fighting for specific objectives while the Americans were simply trying to survive. That kind of mission clarity gave attackers tremendous psychological advantages in prolonged engagements. The radio crackled with a new voice older, carrying the gravelly tone of someone who'd spent decades in the intelligence community. "This is Kingfish. I'm the package you're trying to protect." The transmission bypassed all normal communication protocols, cutting directly to the heart of the tactical situation. "Copy, Kingfish. What's your assessment of enemy capabilities?" Valentina's question was directed at someone who understood the broader strategic context of their predicament. "Viper, these are Russian Wagner Group contractors with Spetsnaz training. They're here for data I collected on Pakistani nuclear facility security protocols. If they capture me alive, every American nuclear inspection operation in South Asia gets compromised." Kingfish's words carried the weight of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. The tactical picture suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't a random ambush or even a high-value target elimination. It was a strategic intelligence operation designed to blind American monitoring capabilities across the entire region. The Wagner Group contractors weren't just trying to kill Kingfish. They were trying to capture him and extract information that would compromise ongoing operations from Kashmir to Karachi. "Understood, Kingfish. Blackbird 7, we need immediate extraction protocols. This is bigger than a tactical engagement." Valentina's mind raced through the implications of fighting Russian contractors on Afghan soil while trying to protect intelligence assets that could affect regional nuclear security. "Negative on extraction, Viper. The LZ is still too hot, and we've lost contact with Quick Reaction Force. They hit the backup site simultaneously. This was a coordinated operation designed to isolate us." Reaper's transmission confirmed what Valentina had suspected. This wasn't a tactical engagement that had gone wrong. It was a strategic operation that was going exactly according to plan. Through her targeting pod, she could see enemy fighters moving with renewed confidence as they closed the ring around the trapped Americans. They knew time was on their side. Every minute that passed brought more reinforcements up the valley trails, while the Americans grew weaker and consumed ammunition they couldn't replace. "Viper 1-1, be advised we have multiple aircraft inbound your position. Russian Air Force signatures detected at bearing 270, range 40 nautical miles." The AWACS controller's voice carried the kind of professional alarm that indicated a tactical situation was about to become an international incident. Valentina felt her blood turn to ice water. Russian aircraft operating over Afghan airspace while Wagner Group contractors engaged American Special Operations forces represented an escalation that could trigger diplomatic crises or worse. But it also confirmed that the intelligence Kingfish carried was valuable enough to risk direct confrontation between nuclear powers. She keyed her radio for a transmission that would either save 17 American lives or start a war between superpowers. "All stations, this is Viper 1-1. I'm declaring a tactical emergency and assuming operational control of this engagement. Anyone who doesn't like it can file a complaint with my corpse." Below her, 17 Americans were about to die, unless someone was willing to fight a battle that the rulebook said couldn't be won. Valentina, Viper, Kozlov had spent 4 combat deployments learning that the rulebook was written by people who'd never been shot at by professionals trying to kill them. Today, those rules were about to meet a woman who'd made her own. The A-10 Thunderbolt II banked hard left as Valentina spotted the contrails of approaching Russian aircraft on the horizon. Through her radar warning receiver, she could identify the distinctive signatures of Su-30 flanker fighters, twin-engine air superiority aircraft that could outrun, outclimb, and outmaneuver her ground attack aircraft in any conventional engagement. The tactical situation had just evolved from a rescue operation into a potential aerial combat scenario that could escalate into international conflict. "Viper 1-1, this is Overwatch. Russian aircraft are maintaining course toward your position. Rules of engagement authorize defensive measures only. Do not, repeat, Do not initiate hostile action against Russian Federation aircraft. The AWACS controller's transmission carried the weight of diplomatic protocols that seemed absurdly inadequate given the current tactical reality. Valentina checked her air-to-air missile inventory, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, designed for close-range defensive engagement. Against modern Russian fighters with advanced electronic countermeasures and long-range missiles, her chances in aerial combat approached zero. But the Su-30s weren't her primary concern. They were flying top cover for the Wagner Group operation below, which meant their mission was to prevent American reinforcements from interfering with the capture of Kingfish. Blackbird 7, this is Viper. How much time do you need to complete destruction of sensitive materials? Her question addressed the reality that Kingfish's intelligence couldn't be allowed to fall into Russian hands under any circumstances. Viper, Kingfish advises 20 minutes minimum for secure destruction protocols, but we don't have 20 minutes. Enemy forces are massing for final assault. Reaper's response confirmed what she could see through her targeting pod. Wagner Group contractors were abandoning their protected positions and moving across open ground in coordinated assault formations. The radio burst with automatic weapons fire and the distinctive crack of incoming rounds passing close to microphones. Contact! Contact! Multiple enemy squads advancing from the north and east ridges. Nomad's voice carried the adrenaline-sharpened focus of direct combat engagement. We need immediate close air support. Valentina rolled into a diving attack run that brought her A-10 within 50 feet of the valley floor, her GAU-8 cannon delivering devastating precision fire that stopped the enemy advance in its tracks. But as she pulled up from the gun run, her radar warning receiver screamed with the distinctive tone of missile lock-on. The Russian fighters had dropped to low altitude and were positioning for attack. Viper 1-1, you have multiple missile locks from Russian aircraft. Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers. The AWACS controller's clinical description of imminent death carried the professional detachment that military radio protocols demanded even in life-or-death situations. Instead of climbing away from the threat, Valentina pushed her throttles forward and dove back toward the valley floor. The Su-30 pilots would expect evasive maneuvers that prioritized aircraft survival over mission completion. They weren't expecting a pilot crazy enough to use terrain masking to avoid missiles, while continuing to provide close air support to troops in contact. Her aircraft shuddered as she pulled maximum G-forces in a radical direction change that brought her behind a ridgeline just as 2 R-77 air-to-air missiles streaked through the airspace she'd occupied seconds before. The missiles impacted the mountainside in twin explosions that sent avalanches of rock cascading into the valley below. Outstanding evasive action, Viper, but you've got more company coming. Prophet's transmission was punctuated by the sound of mortar rounds impacting nearby. The Wagner Group contractors were bringing heavy weapons to bear on the Americans' position, while the Russian fighters attempted to eliminate air support. Through her targeting pod, Valentina could see the tactical situation developing with terrifying clarity. More enemy reinforcements were climbing the valley approaches, carrying equipment that included heavy machine guns, mortars, and what appeared to be man-portable surface-to-air missiles. The Americans were about to be caught in a killing zone with no possibility of extraction. Kingfish, this is Viper 1-1. I need an honest assessment. How critical is the intelligence you're carrying? Her question cut to the heart of the tactical decision she was being forced to make. Viper, the data includes real-time security protocols for 17 American nuclear monitoring facilities across South Asia. If Wagner Group extracts me alive, they compromise our ability to track nuclear materials from Pakistan to North Korea. Kingfish's response carried the weight of someone who understood that his life was worth less than the strategic intelligence he carried. The implications hit Valentina like a physical blow. This wasn't just about saving 17 Americans trapped in an Afghan valley. The intelligence Kingfish carried could compromise American nuclear security monitoring across an entire region where multiple hostile nations were developing or expanding nuclear capabilities. The tactical engagement below was actually a strategic operation that could affect global nuclear security. Copy that, Kingfish. Blackbird 7, I need you to understand that extraction is not the primary mission objective anymore. Mission priority is preventing enemy capture of Kingfish and his intelligence by any means necessary. Her transmission carried the cold reality of strategic decision-making, where individual lives became acceptable losses in pursuit of larger objectives. Understood, Viper. We're prepared to execute final option protocols if the tactical situation becomes untenable. Reaper's response confirmed that the SEALs understood they might need to eliminate Kingfish and his intelligence rather than allow capture by Wagner Group contractors. As Valentina climbed back to attack altitude, she could see Russian aircraft repositioning for another missile engagement. They were operating under rules of engagement that prioritized preventing American close air support while avoiding direct confrontation that could escalate into broader conflict. But their tactical patience was about to meet a pilot who'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to make the enemy fight on terms they never expected. The morning sun reflected off her canopy as she prepared for an aerial engagement that would either save American nuclear security interests or trigger an international incident. Either way, Valentina Viper Kozlov was about to remind everyone why her call sign had become synonymous with refusing to accept tactical defeat. The battle was about to become something that would be studied in war colleges for decades, assuming anyone survived to teach the lessons. The two Su-30 flankers split formation as they approached weapons range, their pilots executing a classic pincer maneuver designed to force Valentina into a defensive position where she couldn't provide close air support to the trapped Americans. Through her radar warning receiver, she could track their targeting systems as they maneuvered for optimal missile launch parameters while staying within the boundaries of their rules of engagement. Viper 1-1, this is Ghostwriter 1-3. We are inbound your position with two F-22 Raptors, ETA 12 minutes. The transmission from American air superiority fighters carried the promise of tactical air support, but 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours given the current situation on the ground. Below her, Wagner Group contractors were executing their final assault with the disciplined aggression of professional soldiers who knew their air cover was protecting them from American reinforcements. Through her targeting pod, she could see individual fighters moving from cover to cover as they closed the distance to the Americans' defensive position. Each movement was precise, coordinated, and supported by accurate covering fire. Contact left, they're in the perimeter. The transmission from one of the SEALs carried the desperate intensity of close-quarters combat. Automatic weapons fire echoed off the valley walls as the tactical situation devolved from siege warfare to hand-to-hand fighting among the rocks. Valentina realized with crystal clarity that conventional close air support was no longer possible. The enemy forces were too close to friendly positions for cannon fire or missiles, and the Russian fighters above were preventing her from maintaining the kind of persistent overwatch that ground forces needed in close combat situations. She needed to eliminate the air threat immediately, even if it meant engaging Russian aircraft over Afghan airspace. Overwatch, this is Viper 1-1. Requesting permission to engage Russian aircraft in defense of American ground forces. Her transmission carried the formal language of military protocols, but everyone listening understood she was asking permission to start an air-to-air engagement that could escalate into international conflict. Negative, Viper 1-1. Maintain defensive posture only. Political ramifications of offensive action against Russian Federation aircraft could compromise ongoing diplomatic initiatives. The AWACS controller's response reflected the kind of strategic thinking that prioritized long-term diplomatic relationships over tactical military objectives. But as Valentina watched Russian-trained Wagner Group contractors overrunning American positions, while Russian aircraft prevented effective close air support, she realized that diplomatic considerations were secondary to the immediate reality of American soldiers dying because political protocols prevented adequate military response. Copy, Overwatch. Switching to defensive posture. Her acknowledgement carried the formal compliance that military radio procedures demanded, but her actions were about to demonstrate that defensive posture could be interpreted very creatively by pilots who refused to watch their countrymen die for diplomatic convenience. She banked hard right and dove toward the valley floor, using terrain masking to avoid the Russian fighters' radar coverage while positioning for what appeared to be another close air support run. But instead of targeting enemy ground forces, she was maneuvering to force the Su-30 pilots into a tactical position where they would have to choose between maintaining their air superiority mission or pursuing an A-10 that was deliberately entering their engagement envelope. "Viper, what are you doing? You're flying directly toward the Russian aircraft." Prophet's transmission carried the alarm of someone who could track aircraft positions and realized that Valentina was deliberately closing distance with fighters that could destroy her aircraft from beyond visual range. "Prophet, I'm providing close air support to American ground forces. If Russian aircraft interfere with that mission, I'm authorized to defend myself." Her response carried the kind of technical accuracy that would satisfy military lawyers while completely ignoring the spirit of her orders to avoid offensive action. The lead Su-30 pilot found himself in an impossible tactical position. An American A-10 was approaching his aircraft on what could be interpreted as either an attack run or evasive maneuvering from ground fire. His rules of engagement authorized defensive measures against hostile action, but determining hostile intent from an aircraft that was simultaneously conducting ground attack missions required split-second decisions that could trigger international incidents. Valentina's radar warning receiver screamed as both Russian fighters achieved missile lock, their fire control radars painting her aircraft with the electromagnetic signatures that preceded beyond visual range missile launches. She had perhaps 10 seconds before they fired, and her only chance of survival was to close distance fast enough to force them into visual range engagement, where her A-10's superior maneuverability might compensate for the Russians' technological advantages. Missile launch! Missile launch! Two R-77s inbound from bearing 090. The AWACS controller's warning coincided with Valentina's radar warning receiver indicating incoming missiles, with time to impact of less than 30 seconds. Instead of attempting to outrun missiles designed to intercept much faster aircraft, Valentina did something that violated every principle of air-to-air combat doctrine. She turned directly toward the incoming missiles while diving toward the rocky terrain below, using her aircraft's exceptional low-speed handling to execute a maneuver that no rational pilot would attempt. The first R-77 streaked past her aircraft as she pulled into a vertical climb that brought her directly between the two Russian fighters, forcing them to maneuver to avoid firing at each other while engaging an American.